This morning, we are kicking off with layoffs sweeping through the tech sector and Meta looking to be joining the ever-growing list as the social media giant is reportedly preparing to notify employees of large-scale layoffs this week. For more on this and the ongoing uphill battles in tech, let's bring in Yahoo Finance's Dan Howley. And Dan, this is one of those things that was kind of anticipated. Mark Zuckerberg on the most recent earnings call had sort of said there could be some cuts coming. What do we know about how significant they are likely to be?
Yeah, the cuts could come in terms of size to the thousands. This is going to be one of the first major cuts that Meta, Facebook, has ever had to do as a company. So these are going to be significant, whether it's a huge number or not. It's expected to, I mean, we've been expecting it for some time based on Mark Zuckerberg's prior comments saying that they would lower expenses for the year. Some of that coming through people costs, he had said. So clearly signaling that they were going to make some kind of headcount reduction. To this point, we don't know exactly how many people will be let go, though Meta does have a massive workforce. And really, this comes down to something that other companies are dealing with, and that was just the overexpansion that they went through during the pandemic. And this kind of unchecked growth that they had, now it's coming back to bite them. And so their employees now are going to suffer as a result. And this also hits Meta at a time where ad sales are plummeting because companies are pulling back just out of fear of a potential recession, as well as obviously the interest rates and foreign exchange rates. So that's hurting ad budgets. So they're then hitting the social media companies. And then obviously they're also dealing with still that privacy change that Apple put into place with iOS. And so that's kind of hurting them as far as how they can target advertising. So those kind of two issues come together, not to mention the pivot to the metaverse, which is costing it billions of dollars, to really just be a perfect storm. And so now we're seeing Meta have to cut back, though. As far as that metaverse spending goes, they're still spending billions and expect to see that increase next year.
Yeah, I mean, $15 billion is what the company has spent so far in Reality Labs. And to your point, Dan, at a time when they've seen significant pullback in what is still largely the core of their business. Let's talk about another tech company we're watching today. Shares of Apple under some pressure. That stock down about 1% here after issuing a warning on shipment delays for its phones. What can you tell us more about this and how much the zero COVID policy over in China is playing into it?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is the zero COVID policy. And, the workers at the factories over there were locked in, or at least in one of their most important factories, were locked in essentially as they were trying to figure out where the COVID was spreading at that plant. And so that really impacted Apple's ability to get these iPhones out. You also saw these pictures of workers trying to escape the factory instead of being locked in, climbing fences, running down highways, just doing anything they can to get away from it. To avoid that lockdown. So, on the Apple side of things, this is obviously going to impact the number of iPhones that they have. It also is negative just because these are the Pro models that we're talking about. And for Apple, they made the Pro models more appealing, seemingly to raise average selling price of the iPhone. We already talked about in the past that the iPhone 14 Pro, that's the standard iPhone 14, iPhone 14 Plus. That's the standard iPhone 14 with a larger screen. They cut back on production of that just out of, the idea that it's not going to be selling as well among consumers. So they cut production on that. The Pros really are the phones that people seem to be gravitating towards. And so the fact that this factory was producing those and they're going to have less of them really means that come the holiday season, Apple could be staring down a miss on the iPhone revenue projections just because they couldn't tell that this was going to happen. And they were projecting, obviously, or analysts were projecting, obviously, that they would have plenty in stock just to get to consumers. So there's that fear that it may impact Apple's bottom line, especially at a time, as I said, when the ASP is so important on these phones.
Yeah, and important to note, this current quarter, the holiday quarter, typically or traditionally the strongest for Apple. So we'll see how it affects their numbers on that front. Dan Howley, as always, thanks so much for that.